This is TK Coleman, and you're listening to Small Business Edge by Ceteris. This is the podcast where we deconstruct small business entrepreneurship through conversations with franchisees, passion-based business owners, and other experts. We learn what it takes to succeed. I'm very excited to be speaking with Jamie Weeks today. We spoke previously for the Ceteris podcast in our first season. You can check out that episode at ceteris.com/podcast. You can listen to all of the episodes from season 1. When we last spoke with Jamie, he told us his story of working in investment banking and wealth management and trying out Orangetheory Fitness for the first time and knowing he had found his next investment. At the time, Jamie owned and operated over a dozen Orangetheory locations and had plans to expand. Jamie's passion is for his team, building a world-class team that loves their jobs. Since then, Jamie won Orangetheory Fitness Franchisee of the Year and sold majority stakeholdership in his company, Honors Holdings, to J.W. Childs, a private equity firm out of Boston. While J.W. Childs owns a majority interest in Honors Holding, Jamie retained a large chunk of the business and will still be expanding operations, and the capital investment from J.W. Childs will help him build out more business and their operations. Today, we're going to talk about the experiences and the thought processes that led Jamie to this decision, what it does and does not mean, what lessons he's learning along the way. We'll also have him answer some of the questions that you submit live, and talk about what his plans are for the future. Jamie, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, TK, good to talk to you again.
Hey, I'm excited, man. So my number one question, I've had a lot of requests for this. You gave a secret to success when we last spoke. Yeah. and your secret to success was 2 shots of espresso every day. Daisy reminded me of this. Is that still a ritual?
Triple espresso with 2 raw sugars. But I guess in the last year, I've tried to give up more and more sugars. So now it's a triple campana, which is just a little bit of whipped cream. It's nowhere near as good, but it's probably a little bit better for me.
I love it, man. As long as the caffeine is still there. Well, before we dive into any questions or topics, I first have to say congratulations on the Franchisee of the Year award. That's really awesome. How did that feel to receive that?
I mean, it's great. Listen, this has been this has really been a process with Orangetheory. I mean, the Franchisee of the Year award should really go to the entire team, and I know that's very kind of cliche to say that, but it's the truth. I mean, especially with us, we're operating in 5 states, and we're spread out. Although we're based in Atlanta, it seems that the franchisee or the owner gets a lot of the credit at times, when my team and what we've built and what we've put together is really the key to this whole thing. And I think that's probably something we'll talk about today, is the human capital part of the business and franchising, and how important that is, other than just one person.
Before we get into the question of why you decided to sell, let's do a brief recap for those who didn't hear our podcast or those who haven't listened in a while, as to why and how you got into Orangetheory. Yeah,
sure. So, I mean, I've worked in, I'm 43 years old with a wife and 2 little girls, and I've worked in finance and investment banking and wealth management for the last 20 years of my life, out of college. And while we've been very fortunate and have done well, I've always had a passion for being an entrepreneur and being a business owner. And over the last 6 or 7 years, I think I told you last time, I was a full-on Flywheel addict. I mean, I loved Flywheel and would go all the time, and really started to get a great feeling about group fitness, and started doing some research there, and looked into, Barry's boot camp and other spin concepts and 30-30 concepts and those kind of things. And there was an Orangetheory that opened up near our house in East Cobb, Georgia, and Marietta, Georgia. And I went and worked out and realized that they had figured it out, and still feel that way today, that it's the best workout you're going to find. It's so non-intimidating. It's inclusive to all people, on top of being a great workout. And it's a great sense of community. And there's other great fitness concepts out there. And over the last 3 years, more have come to try to be similar to Orangetheory. But I think Orangetheory just has a couple things that others don't have. And so I decided to buy a couple licenses and see if I could open 2 or 3 studios. And and realized after we opened one that, number one, I really enjoyed it and felt like I was getting I was fulfilling a passion that I had to being an entrepreneur and a business owner. And the second thing is they did very well financially. And so to me, it was something I wanted to, take even further, and started buying more and growing more and doing more.
And how long have you been running Orangetheory Fitness Centers?
Yeah, so yeah, Orangetheory Fitness Studios. So we've this will be about 4 years now. About 4 years since I purchased my first license.
All right, so you were in this for the love. You're having a good time. Things are profitable. Why did you decide to sell?
Yeah, well, I mean, listen, it's not so much I decided to sell. It's I took on a private equity partner to get bigger and go further. For me to kind of take the business where I wanted to go, I knew I needed a partner. And at the time, we had about 16, 17 studios open, maybe 18. I could have organically gotten to about 30 on my own, but ideally, I'd like to get even bigger than that. And knowing that, I knew the time was right for me to take on a private equity partner. I mean, there's a lot of other, probably macro philosophies I have about that as well. With my background in finance, I felt that with the 10-year Treasury and rates ticking up, I was a little bit concerned about that. I was a little concerned about the geopolitical environment. I was concerned about a lot of things, and what I didn't want to see is what we've done for 3 years, what we've built for the last 3 years, dwindle because of things that are completely out of my control. So I thought, for me personally, it was a time to take on a partner and see if we can't get a little bit bigger faster, but also at the same time kind of protect what I've built.
It's one thing to know you need a partner. It's another thing to know how to find them. How did you navigate that process of finding a good partner?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I didn't know how to find a partner. I was very fortunate that I hired an investment bank. I had asked around and had been recommended a couple investment bankers that I won't say on this call, just because I don't know if they want their name out there for this kind of stuff. I found an investment banker and their group, and contacted them, and we sat down and kind of did a review of my portfolio and the business. And fortunate enough, they were impressed with the structure of the business inside Orangetheory. They were very familiar with Orangetheory, and they knew, in the fitness franchising world, Orangetheory is a behemoth right now. And to be a large franchisee with good studios, with operating at a high level, says a lot. And so they also liked the structure that we had built from a home office team. And to me, that's the most important thing, was the organization that we had built. And so when you put all those factors together, they looked at it and said, I think you're gonna be able to find a partner pretty easily. And I use that word easily very loosely. There's nothing easy about it, but they didn't think it would be difficult to find a partner.
So this process went by very quickly for you, right?
From the time that I chose a partner until we closed was about 30 or 35 days. But it took 6 months from the time that I chose the investment bank and signed an agreement letter with them to when we closed. It took a full 6 months. And it was, the most intense 6 months of my entire life. I mean, and again, it goes back to, that 6 month period, they were asking questions that I never even thought about. And not just financial questions, everything about the business, from the turnover employees to the attrition of the membership, to every single thing we signed in a lease, everywhere, every document we've signed. I mean, such an in-depth audit and such an in-depth look at the business that I was prepared for maybe half of that, but I wasn't prepared for the other half of that. And that was a real eye-opening thing for me.
That part, that other half that you were unprepared for, all of those questions no one could have even told you they were going to ask. If someone's listening to this right now and they're thinking, well, I might go through a similar process, how can I prepare? What's something that you maybe wish that you knew or you would do differently to make sure you were prepared? Yeah,
God, so many things. And it's funny, I've started another business with some other really, really, really smart, much smarter than me business people, motion stretch studios. And so we have 4 open studios right now. And I tell you this because everything we're doing in the early stages of this business are things that I learned that we should have done in the early stages of Orangetheory. As an example, we're uploading every document we sign to one cloud account. So we have everything saved in one area to where whenever we want to sell this business, someone will come along and I'll say, here's the password, here's every document sorted by whatever you need. So to me, the organization of the business. We were extremely organized, but we could have been even more organized. And I mean, we were really organized, but from the documents, to me, that's the most important thing. Having, the investment bank's going to create what they call a data room. And in that data room is literally everything to do with your business. So something that I would do differently is create my own data room in the middle of this business right now, and which we're doing with Motion. Create this data room right now to where everything's right there and I'm not scrambling looking for stuff and it's in one area. When a private equity firm or a family office or an investment bank comes to look at your business, if it is as organized as they want it to be before they tell you what you should be doing to organize it, you're going to be in a much, much better shape. And so we were 80% of the way there. They were impressed with how organized it was, but that 20% would have been real nice to have.
When you say something like upload every document that you sign to a single cloud account, it just makes sense, right? The moment you inform me thusly, I can't even imagine another way. So I'm curious, what way were you doing before for that particular example?
Yeah, so it's funny. So, on my home office team, I've got an HR person that handles all the HR stuff, and she's in charge of all that and has all the documents, has all the non-competes, all the employment agreements, all that stuff. And then we have a real estate person on my team that's one of my partners and an attorney, and he has all the leases and he has everything there, and he has it filed all his way. And then there's all of the franchisor documents that was held with my COO, and he has a way of organizing it, keeping it straight, and none of them kept it all the same way. And so now we have one account. So I mean, we pay for a corporate DocuSign account, and I think it's $2,500 a year, and everyone uploads into DocuSign all the documents, and then internally we sort those and keep them organized there. And it's the biggest no-brainer on the face of the earth, and it's something I wish we'd have known about 4 years ago, and I should have been smart enough to know something like that.
Well, it's great that with the new endeavors, you get a chance to apply that. Jamie, one of the things you said is the investment bank, they were very impressed with the structure of your business. Can you talk to me more about that?
Yeah, and this is something that, I've gotten a lot of questions on from other Orangetheory owners here in the last probably 90 or 120 days of, what does the structure look like? And to me, it's extremely important to, even if you only had 4 or 5 studios, to have those key people at a home office that are running the business like a real business rather than just maybe managers. And you may be able to do it with just managers, but having that regional manager, having that HR person, having those layers, and maybe 8 studios is the number where you do it. I don't know. It may be different for every person, but to me, finding and having that really high quality person that can handle just that and only that makes a really big difference. I think one of the things we tend to do in a franchise world is we as owners have to wear a lot of hats, and I completely understand that. But there's a lot of times we're asking people that have only been out of school for 3 to 7 years to also wear a lot of hats, and they don't have the same experiences that we do. And so the days of the master generalist where one person could do everything, I think are really, really difficult to do. And so one of the things I want to do early on in this was start putting people in place that are really, really good at 1 or 2 things and letting them run with that. And by doing that, you're holding people responsible to that, to their line item and what they're doing. But at the same time, you can see things much clearer. And to me, that's what I need. I need that transparency in the business. And when I have my 3, 4, or 5 people in the home office, our home office in Atlanta, now it's 8 people doing this, it allows me to see the business much more clear versus 1 or 2 people trying to handle everything. I understand you have to get in the weeds, but man, sometimes you're down there, you miss everything else.
Mm-hmm. One of the things we talked about before was the role of having that accounting precision and how critical that was as you went through this due diligence process. Would you mind sharing some of those thoughts with me?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, listen, it obviously sounds like a complete advertisement for Ceteris, which is actually what it should be. I will tell you, I've used Ceteris for every one of my studios in every way. And the private equity firm and the investment bank, I had to do a quality of earnings. So we had a quality of earnings done by a third-party firm in Atlanta. And then we that quality of earnings was really based on the work that Ceteris had done for the previous 3 years. And then you also had the private equity firm had their own accounting firm come in and look at everything. And that accounting firm, which is RSM, and they're amazing. They sat down with me and said, listen, we've been doing this for 20 years, and I don't know that we've ever seen something this organized from a financial standpoint. I would love to take the credit for that, but I will tell you that 90% of that credit belongs to Ceteris. And in a franchise model, you would say to yourself as a business owner, well, I really don't need a bookkeeper because it's all pretty much the same. All studios are the same, and I can kind of do it myself. And in a way, mentally, you're right. But physically, when you sit down and look at the business on paper and you have 10, 15, 20 studios, having that bookkeeping done and looking at it at the end of the month, I mean, what Ceteris delivers to me is a consolidated report before the 10th of every month of the previous month. So on May 8th, I'll have a consolidated report of all my financials of all 22 studios for the month of April. I know for a fact you're absolutely not going to find that anywhere else. You're not going to find it for what I'm paying. I feel like I'm getting tremendous value, and I think I'm paying $350 or $400 a month for my bookkeeping work to be done with Ceteris. And to be able to get those numbers, I'm even getting live data. And so when we had a private equity firm come in who had never heard of Ceteris before, we had JW Childs come in, and they've been, I couldn't have asked for a better partner. It just was amazing. I said to them, listen, this is something that I personally want to keep in place for a long time. And they said, we agree 100%. Before we looked at the books, I don't know that we would have agreed, but now looking at this and what they've done and what they've allowed you to go focus on, we absolutely agree 100%. So here we are with a $4 billion private equity firm, $3 billion private equity firm as a partner who can choose anyone as an accounting, any firm to do all of our bookkeeping and everything. And we've chosen to continue with Ceteris. I think that speaks volumes.
That is impressive. That's very impressive. When we first spoke before the webinar, I remember framing our discussion as selling a successful business. And it was very important to you that we framed it as scaling a successful business, not selling. And it was important for you that people don't see this move as Jamie just sort of cashing out. You followed your passion for 5 years, you cashed out, now you're going to buy a yacht and you're not working anymore, you're retiring. You don't see it like that. So tell us, what's the real deal? What's really going on, and how are you still involved?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I have a responsibility to this firm, to JW Childs, who in my first 4 months with them, 5 months with them, like I said, they've been amazing, and I'm working harder now than I was prior to the partnership for a lot of reasons. I mean, listen, right now I have, I think, over 300 employees, and I think one of the keys to what we did the first turn of this business was I gave 4% of my equity to 25 employees. And they were able to get a really nice check in December. And my goal now is to give equity to over 70 employees and see if we can't do this again over the next 3 to 5 years. I'm 43 years old, and I really, really love my job, and I really love my team. And I couldn't fathom not working with the people that I work with every day. I just couldn't imagine it. But I think when you put a group of people together that have the same passion, the same goals, and at the end of the day are good people, it doesn't feel like work anymore. And so right now it doesn't feel like work. And I'm going to tell you, taking on a private equity firm, you would think would be more pressure and more work, but it still does not feel like work because they've been amazing partners. They've been a resource to me, no different than what Ceteris is an amazing resource to me. So listen, I'm acting CEO. I'm in the office more now than I ever have been. I'm working harder than I ever have been. And 95% of my time is spent on honors and growing the Orangetheory brand and business and trying to do the right things for clients and members every single day. While at the same time, I've always had the view that I work for my employees. I have to keep my employees happy. If my employees are happy, then they're going to make the members happy. But when I have unhappy employees, it's really hard for them to make members happy. And so that's what I wake up with every day, is the focus to make sure my employees are happy employees.
I love how you said you're working harder than you've ever worked before, but you sound happier than you've ever sounded before. And that's the goal, right? To not find something that we can quickly cash in on, although, nice work if you can get it, but you tend to generate the best results. You tend to realize most of your potential when you find the thing that's so worth doing for you, that you're happier when you can work harder at it, when you can spend more time at it. So I really love that aspect of your story. Well, one of the things I want to zoom in on for a little bit is you saying, I work for my employees and I want to make them happy. And you said earlier that your goal is to give equity to over 70 employees. I'm curious to know what kind of shaped your philosophy around this, and maybe tell me some more about how you intend to realize this equity goal for your employees.
Well, I mean, I'm not intending to realize it. It's already been realized. I've got a number of employees that have equity already. I would say over 35 or 40 that right now have equity in the business, and I would say by the end of this year it'll be over 70, maybe close to 100 employees will have equity in the business. But
okay, so the goal is to repeat that process, like with the last set of employees.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm not trying to be difficult here, TK. It is being repeated. It's not a goal to. It will be repeated. It's the only way that I'm going to operate this business, because
I love it.
Things that I kind of went into this with as being an entrepreneur is having that mindset of, well, people don't care as much as I do, and people don't work as hard as I do. And then I said, well, why is that? Well, it's because I'm the owner and they're not. So if I can make them owners, then guess what? They're going to care and they're going to work as hard as I have. Because in my previous business in investment banking and wealth management, I was an owner in that business, and I cared and worked hard. And there were times where in that world where I was paid very well, and I felt such an obligation because of what they were paying me that I wanted to work even harder. And so I had this discussion with Levi earlier here at Ceteris about how, I feel like our employees are very, very well compensated. And then when I can add equity into that as well, I'm creating this culture where we're all in this together. We're all partners together. We're all having one goal, which is to make the members happy every day. And if we make the members happy every day, what are they going to do? They're going to refer more members. And everyone wins in this cycle. And so the only way to have people care as much as I care is to make them equal with me and make them owners as well. And that works 8 out of 10 times. And there's 2 times out of that 10 where someone doesn't really care about that. And they get complacent. It doesn't work out. And we have different mindsets and we part ways and go separate ways. But those 8 out of 10 where it's someone who's getting equity and being very well compensated, and they are a true partner of mine, and we're doing this together, it does not feel like work. It feels like we're, really kind of in this thing together, trying to have a bigger goal.
I love the focus. I love the specificity, and I love the confidence. And I felt the chills when you said, TK, it will be repeated. You make me want to go buy a T-shirt, kind of like the Philadelphia 76ers Trust the Process slogan. And you make me want to buy a T-shirt that says "It will be repeated," Jamie Weeks, so I can follow along. All right, so we've got a few questions that have been coming in, and I like to toss some of these your way. One from our audience: what are some specific examples of documents they ask for that you weren't thinking about?
Yeah, well, I don't know if there was anything I wasn't thinking about. It was just having them all. I'm sure there was something I was thinking about, which probably is why I can't remember right now, because I wasn't thinking about it then either. But listen, the leases, the franchisor docs, employment agreements. Oh, I will tell you, one of the things that we have done on my team, and this is really, if you're any franchisee, this makes sense. My team sends out a weekly KPI to kind of our top 10 executives on my team. Ironically, I had saved all of those KPIs that were nothing too in-depth, but pretty detail-oriented over the last 3 years, from 1 studio all the way up to 20 studios. I had saved them all in one file. And I just decided, you know what, I'll upload these and see if this means anything to them. You wouldn't believe the response I got from that. You've saved every KPI for every week for the last 4 years. They're in order. They're labeled by the week, the time, the date, the whole thing. They were able to really then go in there and see a true timestamp of the business and the growth of the business and what happened. And then when I talked to them about seasonality, I could refer to the KPIs at different times of the year of what was going on instead of me just talking about it. Now, you would have other documents and other ways to do that as well, but I think that was something that meant a lot to them. I'm a religious note taker, and I use an iPad Pro and I use Notability, and I take all my notes, and I don't file them as well as I should, but they're filed pretty decently. I was able to show them notes of conversations and of meetings we'd had with teams to describe to them how our culture is and how we run the business and what we do. Those notes were time stamped and date stamped, and so they could see, oh, this was 2 years ago when he purchased his studio. These were the changes they went in to make and the things they did, and you could see the results of it 9 months later. So we purchased the Charleston studio in July of 2016. which was a great studio and was doing well, but it could do better. I made pages of notes after being in the studio for a week of the things we needed to do. And really 90% of it had to do with the culture of the employees. Being able to show them that and then see the results of those studio, then show them the KPI of that studio over the next 9 months in a really unseasonable time of year, third and fourth quarter. I was able to show them kind of what we were doing when we were purchasing studios and the impact we were making.
All right. From another one of our attendees, how do you think the sell was valued when it comes to opening potential new studios for this deal?
Yeah, that's a great question, but also a really loaded question. So it's going to be different for every franchisee. I can't tell you a value on future studio openings and where you're at in that process and what kind of value you would get for it, because it's going to be different. As an example, we had not opened Northwest 23rd in Portland, and we were giving a really good value for that because it's a studio that's going to be a really, really good studio versus others that may not be a great studio. But I will tell you, when you go through this process, when you have 30 licenses, they're not really giving a value to each one. They're looking at all as a whole, and they're saying, listen, your EBITDA in this year is this. We think your EBITDA next year will be this. Therefore, we're willing to pay X.
Got it. All right. So next, how do you find and keep successful studio managers? And what tips do you have about motivating your hourly front desk team?
Yeah, really good question. So I will tell you that I feel like we are one of the highest paying, my group's one of the highest paying studio managers in the system. I will tell you, when you look at a studio that's going to do, and I'm just going to make up numbers here, so don't anyone start yelling at me and screaming at me. But let's say we have a studio that's going to run a $350,000 EBITDA. Paying that manager $45,000 a year or a $75,000 a year studio manager. We all know the difference in that employee between 45 and 75 is so drastic that 300 will most likely be 400 or even 350. That person will pay for themselves 10 times over. And so I think one of the things we get caught up in is, and something I've really tried to avoid, is trying to overthink someone's salary or compensation or payroll. There are ways to make it up, yes. But if you have the right people in place and you feel like you're overpaying those people, but they are delivering, then you have to keep overpaying those people. And you're not overpaying them. You're paying them probably what they're worth. So that's the first part of the question, managers. I hold managers to a really standard, rigid system where 700 members or less, and you're at a certain level, and then above you're at another level, and that difference is pretty drastic in compensation and equity, by the way. So that's a big deal. Hourly employees, we have a really, really good bonus system that all employees in that studio are a part of. It's all the same amount. They're all on the same page. They all have the same goal. That way I have sales associates and managers and coaches and head coaches all working for the common goal. That bonus and that goal changes every 30 days, every month. And it's a substantial bonus. It's a good amount of money. I think that motivates hourly people. So if I have someone working, let's say 25 hours a week at $10 an hour, they're making, right around $1,000 a month. But if there's a $300 or $400 bonus at the end of the month, if they hit a certain thing, hit a certain goal, and it may be an attrition goal, it may be a Listen 360 goal, it may be a number utilization goal, but for them to have a 30 or 40% of their compensation come in a bonus, they're working together as a team, that's a big deal.
All right, next question from an attendee. How are you structuring the equity? Do you have your team members buy in for the equity in the company? And do these employees that earn equity, like what level are they? Facility employees or executives?
Great question. So there's two types of equity. You have shelf equity, which is for managers, head coaches, studio employees. None of them have to buy in. All of them are given equity. And then you have standard equity, which they are giving day of. They start with us or when they're employed with us in the home office. My regional managers are part of my home office. So regional managers and home office executives are given equity, and then studio managers, head coaches have shelf equity. Shelf equity is something that's given to them if the equity is ever vested or sells or anything like that. So for them, it would be a short-term tax. For everyone else, it would be a long-term tax. But for those head coaches and managers, since there is turnover there, it needs to be a shelf equity.
If you do give equity to an employee and decide to part ways, how does that conversation go down? And legality-wise, how do you part ways if that other person refuses to sign paperwork?
Well, I mean, listen, I'm not an attorney here, and I have my attorneys handle into all this stuff for me. Again, the shelf equity alleviates that. Shelf equity is there, and it's not granted to them until the day the business sells or there's a distribution or anything like that. So if that person were to leave, it was never theirs. It's theirs on a shelf in their name, but it's not legally theirs yet. For employees that have equity, we've structured it. Let's say a regional manager decides to leave. They know in the paperwork that if they leave, they're forfeiting their equity. It's pretty standard, pretty simple stuff.
Okay. What new business endeavor did you recently start?
Yeah. So Motion Stretch Studios, which is a 30-minute myofascial one-on-one stretching. Myself and 4 other partners did that, and I'm not going to say their names because they may not want to be mentioned. Listen, what is it? This is an extension into health and wellness, an extension into kind of where I think, we've got everyone building fitness studios and everyone working out, but no one's really focusing on recovery. And I think this is a big deal. I'm 43 years old, and I was just having this conversation that, when I was 30, I could drink 5 nights a week and work out 6 days a week and not even think about it. Now, if I drink, I need 3 days to recover. And if I work out, I need 2 more days to recover from that. So it's just, as you get older, it's hard to do all of that stuff. And so, stretching as I get older and as all of us get older is a really, really important component to health and wellness. I don't have time for yoga. I don't have time to go do an hour of hot yoga and a whole nother membership. And so myself and 4 partners got together and created Motion Stretch Studios, which is one-on-one myofascial stretching. You go in, you're fully clothed, you're in an open environment, you get stretched out for 30 minutes, you stand up, you got the blood flowing, you feel amazing, and you get back out there and work out harder again and keep going. So it's we're 4 studios open. We'll have probably 15 open by the end of this year. I get the question a lot, are we going to franchise it? Right now, we don't plan on franchising it. It's something we're going to keep to ourselves and keep building and growing. But I think health and wellness needs a lot more recovery than it has of just working out.
Mm-hmm. Next up, does Ceteris provide you with cash basis or accrual basis financials?
Yeah, so I asked for it as a cash basis. I think they could do either. I don't know the answer. I'm pretty sure they can do either, but I asked for it in a cash basis. And so taking it to GAAP or taking it to accrual, I'm sure they can do, but for me, I want it on a cash basis.
All right. Next up, what kind of multiples on EBITDA? What are the intangibles that can increase the multiple?
Yeah, obviously I can't answer a multiple question. It's going to be different for each person. But I mean, I think, listen, the intangibles are things like, my multiple was going to be a lot less if I decided I wanted to cash out and just walk away. I mean, a lot less, which I had no plan to do anyway. But I think, being able to say, hey, I'm willing to stay on and keep running this thing and grow this thing, having that home office structure, making it feel and operate really as turnkey as possible is really one of the keys. I think the less turnover in that business and employees, the better it shows stability. Those are the kind of things they really, really look for. And the growth. I mean, you've got to be able to show that your studios are performing. If you show your studios performing and you're doing it from just organically and from acquisition in different states and different areas, that you can really operate a major business. Not saying I can, but just being able to show that you've demonstrated what you can do. Those are all things that are going to be part of that.
Next up, what is the number 1, number 2, and number 3 trait you look for when hiring a SMHC or sales associate?
Humility, compassion. You've got for all of them, by the way, the same thing. I mean, that humility, that compassion. You've got members coming in, intros coming in that are extremely intimidated, that have not worked out in years, that are extremely self-conscious. And what they don't need is someone who makes it all about themselves. What they need is someone to say, hey, we got you. I love you. I'm here for you. We're going to do this together. There are a lot of studios where my team is working out with intros, and I know we all do this, but are working out with intros because they know how intimidated they are. They know this is the first time they've worked out in 4 or 5 years, and they know that this is just opening that door is an enormous struggle for these people. And so when you realize that and you sympathize with them and you understand that, you've immediately built that relationship. But if you look at them as just a number and you look at them as just another sale, you're not going to build that relationship and have a long-term member for life that's going to go out raving about that sense of community and what you're doing in that studio.
Those are really great insights to keep in mind. And that applies to so much more than fitness, really being able to appreciate, empathize with all the various ways in which your potential customer might be intimidated by the things surrounding the service you provide. Next up, is each studio you own profitable?
Yes. I mean, some are extremely profitable and some I wish were more profitable. I mean, listen, it's these things, they're not all equal. And that was one of the things I had to have the conversation with, a private equity group about, who has never really been in a fitness space like this, a franchise fitness space, for them to understand, well, Jamie, why does this one make this much money and this one make this much money? Well, this one's in a much better area. This one has better demographics. This one has a better head coach. This one has this. Every one of my studios are profitable. Yes, absolutely. I wish some were doing better and some do so well, I can't believe it. So I think there's a balance there.
All right, we're going to make time for one more, and then we'll move to any final thoughts and wrap. We have 2 locations, soon adding a third, and getting bogged down with small details, especially personnel. We need to invest in marketing and growing, but have yet to achieve that focus. Any suggestions for books, articles, strategies, etc.?
I wish I were smart enough to say, oh, I read these books, but I'm not. I think when you go from 2 to 3, that is it's like kids, right? I mean, I've got 2 little girls and we are on our heels 24/7. If I had 3, I just cannot imagine when they start outnumbering you. And so the same thing I think goes with studios. I think at 3 studios, it's time to probably have a regional manager over those 3 that can be a real liaison between the owner and the studios. Allow that owner to stay at 30 and 40,000 feet to really manage the business from a high level while that regional manager is in the details. And so, listen, when you have 3 studios, these things should be making really good money. You should be able to afford a regional manager at a really good rate, someone that's mature and qualified and understands it and gets it and has that humility as well. So I think that's probably, it's not so much we need marketing and we're into details. You probably shouldn't be in the details. You probably should have someone else doing those details, and you should stay at 30 and 40,000 feet.
All right, Jamie, we began by checking in on your super success tip with the daily espresso. I like to end with your top 3, Jamie's top 3 lessons learned, the 3 most important things as a result of you going through this process that you would like your audience to remember, to take away.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So I would say there are 4 things in a business that you can really, really focus on, right? Revenue, expenses, human capital, and process. And as owners, we tend to focus on revenue and expenses the most because it's the easiest. But I'm going to tell you right now, human capital and process, those are the 2 most important things, and it's not even close. It's real easy for a private equity firm to come in and they're going to look at the revenue and expenses. That's obviously the first thing they're going to look at. But if you can't display the human capital and the process to which you're running that business, then it's going to be really difficult to really kind of display the business that you have and the culture you've built and those kind of things, right? I think that's extremely important. So I think focusing on human capital and process are going to be 2 of the key 2 things that you have to do. I would say that's one. I would say the second thing is just because it's the highest bid doesn't mean it's the best partner. Now, I had 9 bids from 9 different private equity firms, which is not something I'm really vocal about. And I went with the one that I thought was going to be the absolute best partner for me going forward from a culture standpoint, from who did I get along with, who looked at this as a real partnership versus just another investment. And I think that's a real key here. And I'd say the third thing is are you focused every day on making it about the members? Because one of the things that the private equity firm was able to take away was I gave them our Listen 360s over the last 3 years, and they could see the comments. Our Listen 360s, and I focus really on the 3-month Listen 360 because it's one we're able to really move the most, obviously, in a short period of time. And it really shows kind of the breadth of the business and where we're at and what we're doing. And to show them 16 studios that have a Listen 360 of 91% or better, and then show them that Listen 360 gives you charts of where you've been over the last 2 and 3 years since you opened. And that's a real display right there of the satisfaction of your member. And again, if you take my thought here of I work for my employees, if I make them happy, they make the members happy. And then they see the business with not very much turnover in the employees. they were able to say, yeah, it makes sense. That's why members are, rating these guys where they're rating them, from your Facebook stars to all that kind of stuff. It's a really, really big deal.
I love that top three. For those who are taking notes, as I am, my summary here is number one, invest in human capital and focus on the process. Number two, the highest bid does not always equal the best partner. Focus on the right culture fit. And number three, make it about the member. For those of you who want more information, feel free to email us at sales@ceteris.com. And if you would like to hear my prior interview on the Ceteris podcast with Jamie, you can go to ceteris.com/podcast. Jamie, it has been a pleasure chatting with you again. Thank you so much for joining us, and thanks to our audience for hanging out with us today.
Thanks again, TK. Talk to you soon.
Wishing you all the best. For added insights and a full collection of episodes from Small Business Edge, visit ceteris.com/podcast.